Hey, good morning, mediums. It's season 39 or season 2, episode 39. Two sentences in, and I'm already restart, go again. Welcome to Keystroke Medium. I am Josh Hayes here with my co-host Scott Moon, and today, best-selling author of the epic fantasy series, the Sap.
Dude, you had it before the show. What's going on here? Man?
So you can't even do it now.
Safanarion
Order, the space opera Ascension series. Ken Lozito. Ken has been publishing and writing since 2013, and today he joins us to talk about his writing journey. Hopefully, if we can ever start the show.
It's nerves.
Two lines. I was not nervous at all until I started reading the intro at all. And then I just screwed it all up. And I'm looking at your little icon in the show notes that's right by the 39. And I was like, season 39. No, that's not right.
Season 39. How many episodes would 39 seasons be?
Way too many.
I mean, too early in the morning for that.
We'll be in our wheelchairs or a hover around.
758.
It's Josh Hayes, and we're with I don't know who. Welcome, guys that are in the chat. Preston Lay was first today. Haha. And
Preston.
JR sent me a message, said he couldn't be here today, so in loving memory of JR, this show is dedicated to. Ken Lozito is here. He's going to talk about some books and his awesome writing schedule, which blew me away when we talked about it in the sound check. Ken, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the invite.
Oh, yeah. I was excited to have you on, man. I have been watching your book covers and listening to your audiobook for a while, looking at your book covers for a while. I've been listening to Star Shroud here. I got it on Audible, which is a fantastic book. If you haven't listened or read it already, check it out. It's very cool. For the people that may not know anything about you or your books, can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your writing?
I started writing when I was probably about 14. I started making up my own ends to stories, writing scenes and stuff like that. And then I proceeded to tweak the first 100 pages of Road to Shandara for about 20 years before I decided, I'm going to write this. And the rest is history. So it's a little bit about me.
It sounds like a pretty good work schedule. I mean, that's, 20 years on a project, right?
Yeah. 20 years of doing it wrong and just trying,
I think a lot of us have done that.
Waiting for the muse to strike. Having babies,
oh yeah.
Like that. So
all that life stuff, it's so in your business all the time when you're a writer. Which is good, I guess. But
you'll never find time.
Well,
you have to take time.
From what Josh was saying during your guys' pre-show chat, that you have since done quite a bit of changes as far as your writing schedule and things. So when we get to that, I'd like to dig into that, because a lot of us are part-time writers that face these mountains of life to get around to get the writing. I'm blabbering. Why am I talking still? Josh, can you say something and save me here?
Something and save you here. You mentioned that it took you 20 years of dabbling to write the Road to Shandara. But since then, you've been publishing since 2013, and you have, I think, 10 or 11 novels.
Yeah, 10 books. I have a couple of box sets and some short stories, but I don't count short stories as books. They're short stories, So yeah,
indeed. Yeah. So let's talk about your first series then, the Road to Shandara, or the Safanarion Order. How can I not say it in the intro? And I just said it when I wasn't thinking about it.
You warm up. It's just like doing a CrossFit event. You can't just start with double overhead dumbbell throws or something. You got to warm up first.
Next time I'll start the episode, I'll hit live, and then I'm just going to stand here and do exercises for 5 minutes before we do anything.
Probably so we should have a warm up.
You pinned it. You said it was epic fantasy. Can you talk a little bit about it and the characters?
Yeah, I market it as epic fantasy, but it's a blend of science fiction and epic fantasy. My first foray into fantasy when I was started reading was Pierce Anthony, the Adept series, and in that series their main character went from a science fiction world to a fantasy world and back and forth. And I think that just had an impact on me that, came through in this work, because in The Road to Shandar, my main character is from Earth and he goes to a fantasy world, and he's, and as the story progresses, and instead of fighting, your demon horde or whatever you're going to find in a fantasy world, they end up being visited by aliens, ultimately, not on a spaceship, but through like a wormhole and stuff like that on the planet. And that has, extenuating consequences before Aaron was born, and then, sets the stage for the 4-book series. I originally,
what's your main character's name?
Aaron Jace.
Aaron. Okay.
That's his Earth name. And he's from, his family name is Alenzar Seth, which were the rulers of Shandar, that the city was vanquished before he was born. So I'll just set it up. It's basically off the blurb. When his grandfather dies, the protection that was given to him is gone, and he starts getting pulled back into it. And ultimately, he's got to, in order to deal with this, he has to go to the other world and learn about it and who he is and things like that. And I don't know. I originally came up with it when I was in high school. It was kind of like, hey, I'm staying up late and I scared myself because it's 2 a.m. and I think there's something, you see a shadow or something crazy like that. I'm like, well, what if this guy was getting hunted and he was from Earth? And then, at the time, like Star Wars was out and Superman, Luke Skywalker is, part of this powerful family, and he gets pulled into, the Star Wars universe. So there's those elements of that in the story. And, it just became a lot of fun to write. I mean, I must have started this a couple different times, like in high school and then again in college. And like I said, I had a brief stint where I actually got to 100 pages and then I just stopped. And mostly I didn't like my writing. When you read like Terry Brooks and Robert Jordan, and they're writing these big behemoth epic stories with a lot of descriptions and stuff like that, I had to learn that that's not my writing style. And it took a little while to 20 years to accept that. One of the biggest things I could say for being as prolific as I've been the past few years is accepting that the first draft, the writing, it's okay to suck the first draft, accept that it's not going to be perfect and just get the words out.
We talk about that quite a bit, about getting through that first draft and not stalling out because you're overthinking it and stuff. But you're right, because it takes a while. I do the same type of thing where my big version of that is that I would go back and start the beginning. And so the first 3 chapters get worked and worked and worked and worked and worked.
Yep.
And by the time you get to in a longer book to the end, you're exhausted. You're physically, mentally, emotionally drained, and everything you do just seems like total crap. But if you put it away for a while, then you're like, yeah, that's pretty good if you see it later.
Yeah, I spent like a majority of that 20 years with Aaron still on Earth, and I knew the bulk of the story was going to be when he gets to Safanar, and yes, when the good stuff happens. And accepting that learning what trips you up is one thing. Like for me, descriptions trip me up only because I'll start focusing that on writing rather than getting the story out. And now how I get around that is just, if they're in a room, they're in the room. I don't have to describe the room. They're in a corridor, wherever they are on whatever they're doing. Doesn't need the extensive description that can come with a revision in order to get the story out.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you spent 20 years dabbling in it and writing it. Did you, during that 20 years, did you know how the book was going to end, or did you know that you were going to turn it into a series? And if you knew that, when you finally sat down and finished it, did you just know that's where I'm going and you just sat down and finished it, or what?
I knew it was going to be a series. I read mostly series, not standalone. So it's kind of how my brain works. in coming to this. And 20 years, it's on and off 20 years where I'm like, hey, I'm going to dabble a little bit and then I won't touch it again for a while, So, I think I answered it.
And so we have a couple questions in the live chat. The first one is about world building, but I want to hit Preston's question first about the draft because it kind of ties into directly what we're talking about. Did the story change at all from the 20 years that you spent planning it to when you actually sat down to finish it and then continue the series? Has the story changed from your original idea?
Absolutely. I mean, in high school, I was firmly in the fantasy world, and that's what I was going to build. And they, what I wanted was a strong hero that was going to come and that the evil people were going to underestimate. And that part remained consistent, but the scope of the struggle definitely changed because it went from like a demon army that they had to face to an advanced army that was on the cusp of invading this world. And that became the motivating factor. And I honestly didn't get to that until maybe the third part of the book, because what Aaron learns is that there's a being that hunted down all of them after the city was destroyed. And when he comes back to the planet, this super being learns of it and starts to hunt him. And in that struggle, he realizes, I'm not facing just another guy. This guy has things that you wouldn't find on a fantasy world. Basically, I didn't go medieval fantasy with this world. It's more like probably 17 or 1800s, but they have things instead of gunpowder. But and all right. So speaking of that, if you've read David Eddings, that they ride horses a lot for all the books. And when I was writing my story, I had the horse aspect in the beginning. And then when I actually got to the fantasy world, I was like, I don't want to sit in a damn saddle for 300 pages going across this world. So I definitely didn't conceive of that way back then. And I was like, well, let's use an airship. And
very cool.
And it's not, the science works different on this world. I mean, they have crystals that change certain properties, so you don't have to have the cell that holds the airship aloft be so huge to support an airship. There are different things like that in the magic system and stuff like that. So in a nutshell, yes, it did change. Certain elements remain the same, like the family name. Taramis is one of the villains who is hunting him, but and then the other villains remain the same. Like there was always a high king who was super powerful and who he'll face as the series goes on.
A little bit ago, KV1 asks, how do you approach world building in your stories? And you touched a little bit on it just for this last bit that you talked about. But I'm curious about is you mentioned it changing as you wrote the books. And so did the plot point affect the world building that you had already created? And like you mentioned, I don't want to ride in a saddle, so we're going to have airships and bringing airships and a magic system. Is this a high fantasy world, or can you talk about the world building and the magic system a little bit?
Yeah, I love the term high fantasy. Okay, I wouldn't call this high fantasy because I won't have elves and dwarves. It's been done a lot, and I didn't want that in my world. I mean, I do have dragons, but I also have things that are like dragons called Ryakuls, and it's basically a dragon infected with a zombie virus. I mean, to make it cool, I took a different twist on there. So as far as the world building went, I don't do I know writers who will world build the hell out of their world, and I see it as a time suck because they never write the story.
Yeah.
So my world building is a bit light when compared to certain other epic fantasies when it comes to that. I mean, there are rules and I adhere to the rules. So in the magic system, it's not a spell casting type world or magic system. It's basically people who are attuned to using energy, and you have like anybody else, if you have an ability where you're good at something, you could just do it better than some other people. The knowledge of that kind of stuff is, locked away for a select group who are basically holding the world by the throat. And I don't have a lot as far as the rules for the magic system. Like when I think of rules, I think of I don't want to bring them up, but because you love Sanderson so much,
I knew he was going to do it. I knew he was going to do it.
Yeah. Well, we talked a little bit in the chat group about D&D and stuff, like in D&D, you have a monsters manual and you have a dungeon player's handbook, and the rules are laid out in exacting detail. But when you're writing, I think there's two ways to world build. You can build out with your story, or you can build your world and write into the world. And they both have their benefits. But I can see where I know some people that have my son, who's an excellent writer. He's been building this world, and it's fabulous. It's so much more complex than anything I've ever created, but he just hasn't started writing the book yet.
That's cool.
So
I see that you tried to get away from mentioning Sanderson, and I will not hold that against you, Ken, because I know.
Did Sanderson write Firefly? Because that's what I thought.
Oh, see, now you're just playing with my emotions. I'm really intrigued by this world, and it looks like everybody else. A lot of people like the zombie dragons, which is cool. For our live audience, and then actually people that are listening too, I'm not sure how long it's going to be on special, but this book, Ken has put it at 99 cents. For at least the short term. So The Road to Shandora, the book we've been talking about, is 99 cents right now on Amazon if you'd like to go pick it up at a special price. And that was really cool for him to do that for the show. We have been talking about the epic fantasy series that you have written, but you've also done a space opera series, which has been very successful, which is the Ascension series. The first book, Star Shroud, I've been listening to on audiobook narrated by Jeff Mays or Jeffrey Hayes? Jeffrey Mays. I can't remember which. Hayes.
Yeah.
Without the E. It's and it's I think I've listened to about 2 or 3 hours of it, and we're just getting, I think, ready to get to the meat of the story, and very interesting characters so far. Phenomenal cover artwork, I will say. It's
got an awful lot of reviews and a really good rating on those reviews too on the Star Shroud.
Yeah. The latest cover for Rising Force was the 5th book that just came out this month. What, last week?
Yeah, last week.
Amazing cover for the Rising Force cover.
All of the covers are good. Your fantasy covers are also spectacular as well.
Thank you. Appreciate
I love
that.
covers. I'm sorry, I just geek out on them. But anyway,
me too. When I start looking at covers and trying to get a brief to the cover designer, I sit there and I'll get lost for hours looking at other people's covers, and even if it makes sense or not. So,
right.
I get it.
Make this cover awesome.
When I went on 99 Designs to get some of my cover work done, I probably spent 5 hours scrolling through the projects, looking at the different things artists had done. But I digress. The Ascension series, space opera. It's a near future space opera.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about Star Shroud?
Yeah. All right. When I finished the Safanarion Order, I wanted to do something different, and I had this science fiction idea kicking around in my head, and I think that was it was really smart to write something different. It was, in a way, it was freeing because I didn't have the constraints of the previous world. And like Zach Quick is one of the main characters. He's a hacker in that series. It was nice. I wrote him unapologetically. I think it was one of my he turned into one of my most favorite characters to write because he's, he thinks what he thinks and he says what he says. And he's insanely smart. So it was kind of fun. But what was weird, it took a little bit to disconnect from writing the old series because it took me 2 years to write those 4 books. And then get into this other series, and it was freeing because my writing improved from dealing with different challenges and writing a new story. And yeah, people seemed to like it. So that was nice. So the Star Shroud, about the story. I basically took a news headline about New Horizons, the spaceship that took pictures of Pluto. I'm a bit of an astronomy geek. And I was like, well, what if they found something on there, like an alien structure? And then I started looking at, how the data gets transferred back to Earth. And I'm like, all right, well, what if there was an intermediary in there that scrubbed the photos before it was released to the public? And it just kind of took off from there. I tied in a military program from the 80s called the Stargate program, which was the military's investigation into remote viewing. So I have, some magic in my science fiction world intermixed with a lot of the facts. So, the first chapter in this is one of these remote viewing sessions that the military is conducting, and they receive an alien message. And it's, starts in the 80s, and then it fast forward to, I think the year 2048 or 2046. And my hacker is discovering the unaltered pictures of Pluto and this alien structure on there. And once he stumbles into it, he realizes, oh shit, they're going to track me because, the military can track much better than your security firm. And in response to that, he pushes those unaltered pictures along with a little write-up to every news outlet on the planet. So, kind of busts this wide open, and, it exposes the conspiracy, and, and you take it from there. Then they get on, he gets Volin drafted to go to Pluto, and kind of learns how to be an astronaut on the job. So it was a lot of fun.
Voluntold, I like to say.
Voluntold. We're all familiar with Voluntold.
And I haven't, obviously I'm just on the first book, but this book continues as a space opera, and how do you branch that off into the series? Like, is it going into further contact with aliens and
Yeah, so I basically, I keep saying basically, and I hate it when I say that.
once you key into it, it's hard to let it go. Yeah.
Every time I listen to the podcast that we've done, I tell myself, don't say, and I say all the time. It's stupid.
You should change your name to
Yeah.
Anyway, so let's get on to the story here. So we were saying.
Yeah, so there are aliens in this, and Earth is basically being pulled into an intergalactic struggle. Now I'm doing nice.
Well, and it's funny, Josh, because I never even noticed that you do that. So that must just be your own.
Now that I pointed it out, everybody's going to be making fun of me.
So.
Yeah. So there's an alien species called the Boxons, and what the world building for this series is much more fresh in my mind than the previous series, because that is a couple of years ago. But this society grew up watching entire star systems being snuffed out, and so they take this technology, they come up with what's called the Star Shroud program, which is basically encompassing an entire star system in a shroud that allows your intelligent species developing to see outward, but limit what comes back in. And so they can still observe the universe and learn from that observation. But they wouldn't get clearance to be contacted unless they proved not to be warlike, because they were trying to control the galaxy. So they as other species progress, they basically get portrayed, and and a war ensues, and they end up being vulnerable to one particular species that uses, it's almost like pheromones, but it takes instant control of them, where they're more susceptible than other species, and it's basically having your mind wiped and becoming a slave. And you have this battle being fought. So they switch gears where they're looking for species that are resistant to this influence and stuff like that. And, things just as they try and control the universe or the galaxy, they slowly learn that this is something they can't control. And then you have humans show up at the end because I almost gave something away, Josh. Obviously, the humans do leave the solar system at some point, because otherwise you wouldn't have 5 books in the series.
Right.
So, we leave the solar system. We're completely outclassed, and it's just the aliens interacting with us and our influence on them, and vice versa, along with the story shifts, almost splits, where you have ongoing things in the solar system and things outside of the solar system with the crew of the Athena.
So something real quick. Now, Star Shrouds, I can't even say shroud, and I'm giving Josh a hard time about saying the hard words. But Josh, you're listening to it on the audiobook, and you're about 3/4 of the way through it.
About a quarter of the way.
I was getting ready to start the Kindle version, and Preston, I think, mentioned doing the Whisper Sync. So I just picked up the audio to Whisper Sync with the ebook, which is a great way to read, especially if you're really busy, like we've talked about, because you can just listen to it and read it and skip back and forth. So I'm pretty excited about that. And then while we're talking about Galactic Control, Vicky Malone Kennedy in the chat says that Galactic Control is her dream job. So
Nice.
We did have a couple questions that came up, and really quick before we get to them. You noted that the Road to Shandara is 99 cents. The Star Shroud is also 99 cents if you guys want to pick that up too. And I don't see it on here, but it's probably because I've already got the audiobook. But if you get the Road to Shandara at 99 cents, you can get the audiobook for $2.99.
Yeah, you can add it.
And that's a huge deal. Just FYI, if you want to go get I just got the audiobook to Road to Shandara and the 99-cent copy. But Preston, a little while back, was it Preston? No, it was Larry. Larry said, do you think that more science should be in fantasy or vice versa?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I read it somewhere. I heard where the older you get, you start outgrowing the fantasy type stories, but then you see the rise of the grittier, darker fantasy. And I think that has an older audience to it. So I like a bit of science fiction in my fantasy. It solves some problems. And I think sometimes when you try and come up with a fantasy way of like just texting each other, I think sometimes it's kind of cheesy because, my suspension of disbelief doesn't necessarily work that way.
I think that along those lines, a lot of times, when I read some fantasies, you wonder, is there a science? It's never told, like in a lot of the George R.R. Martin stuff. It's fantasy, but I'm always wondering, if I was reading this, if this had been written as a science fiction, would there be a reason for these different communication links, or for the reason the White Walkers are coming? And it's never explained in a sci-fi or science fiction manner, but I suspect maybe it could be underlying there. And that's kind of a neat question, I guess.
I like that Vicky says magic is science, just that we haven't explained yet, which is very good. Because if you went back to medieval times with some of the stuff we have now, it'd be magic to them.
Well, if you went back to 1971 with the smartphone, it would be like literally Star Trek. So
indeed. Preston asked, what challenges did you face going from epic fantasy to space opera, if any?
Oh, I had a hell of a lot of research. And I've been reading like David Weber for the past few years, and I enjoyed it. But a bulk of the Star Shroud took place in the solar system. So, I mean, when you're writing that close to home, you got to get your facts right. And I actually learned quite a bit that interspersed into the story, things like they go to Uranus, and I, joke about the name, but I didn't know things like, the planetary tilt has the North Pole facing the sun at all times, and that it had a ring around it. And it was just, lots of little things like that I'm like, hey, that's cool. That's going in. The person before asked about fantasy and science fiction. As soon as you have FTL, you have fantasy. I mean, if we're going to,
exactly.
When you get to a hard science fiction, it's like, no, we can't, not yet. Yes.
That is very true.
We've talked about that before, and that the border there. I had somebody comment one of my books was space fantasy, and I'm like, I'm totally good with that because that's probably about what it is, you know.
It's interesting what people will comment on. I had somebody comment that I didn't, when they came in from an airlock, that I didn't heat the air, so they would be really cold when they came, or they might freeze or something. And I was like, yeah, okay, but I don't, doesn't do anything for the story.
True, but it's kind of like Elmore Leonard's famous. I think it was Elmore Leonard who said it, or I know he at least repeated it, that you should just write the fun or don't write the boring parts or whatever.
Yeah.
And to me, if the temperature of the air affects the character's choices or the plot, then yeah, I need to know about that. But in general, I probably don't want to stop for every climate change.
Yeah.
In a 300-page book, but that's just me.
So yeah, for the science aspect, I had to do some research and things like that. And but you're when you get into storycraft, your builds, your arcs, your character arcs, that transcends no matter what story you're going to tell. It just has a little bit of a different form. So those skills that you develop for one genre are definitely applicable to another drama. It's just how you deliver on those story promises.
And now, having written both 2 successful series, 1 fantasy, 1 science fiction, do you have a favorite on which genre you like to write?
It's like asking me which children I like more.
Yeah, you're my favorite.
My favorite is always
everyone is not crying at this point in time in my life is my favorite child.
My favorite is always the current thing that I'm writing, which is a series I haven't even released yet. So I like them both. I mean, they both were the Safanarion Order, because I originally conceived of it when I was so young. It's like your first love. You never forget it, but I think the Ascension series is where I definitely matured as a writer, and telling a different kind of story. Yeah, my current project is my favorite. So, yeah,
I
think that's true for
and
people.
That kind of might circle us back around into craft and stuff, because I've noticed that, and I know in Stephen King, in his book on writing, he talks about getting it written within, say, 90 days or something, the first draft. And that if you take years and years and years, sometimes it starts to feel more like a chore. You lose the drive, momentum. And so, like when you say my current project is my favorite, I felt that as well. You're like, this is awesome because it's new and fresh. So now you write faster, as I understand, or do we want to talk about kind of how you get that done and maybe give us some tips?
Yeah, I just to touch back on the other, I've had writing teachers tell me to abandon the story because Road to Shandar, because I hadn't written in it for a while, and to get back into it, I just started retyping it, and it just kind of clicked something. And plus, I had the added pressure of starting to tell my kids the story. I actually wrote about this on my website, and because my wife, I've been with my wife since college, and she knew I had this story in the background, and to get my kids to shut up and sit down and eat dinner, I started telling them about Aaron's Tale, which was what the Road to Shandar was. Mm-hmm. And I got to the point where I'd finished where I was writing, and they wanted to know more. So I started writing more and telling it to them. And then, it became a constructive outlet for me. For writing fast, God, yeah, I'm definitely fall along the lines of an outliner. I do believe that there's a slider between your outliner and your pantser, that I do shift between different projects that I take on. When I first started the Safanarion Order series for Road to Shandar, when I started realizing, hey, if I outline, I'm writing better because I don't have to think about what to come up with. But I could only do like 2 or 3 chapters at a time with a target of what's going to happen at the end. The second book, I could only outlook the first 10 chapters, and I'm like, screw it. That's as far as I get. I'll outline again when I get to the middle of the book. The Star Shroud, I think, as I got on, I got better at outlining because I put a lot of effort into, what's going to give me the biggest bang for my buck. So how I outline is I start off with a brain dump, and that's just like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if this happened? I have some structure. I take that and I come up with, from there I pull. I very much adhere to the 3-act structure, maybe adding the 4th act as a setup for the next book. So I pull out from that brain dump what the 3 acts are, what the main, start getting a feel for the main characters, and then I do what's called a chapter outline, and those are basically like your writing prompts. I pull something up, says, this is going to be, because I do multi-point of view stories. It's this POV, they're here. This is the, I can't even remember my own structure, but it's the question that the chapter asks, and then the answer and ensuing consequences for that, for each character arc. And, that's how I build my Scrivener file.
So you moved ahead of us. That was our next question.
Yeah,
no, that's right.
I was going to say this is leading great into the craft half of the show, which is going to be, and I tell you guys, I talked to Ken on Saturday about what we were going to talk about in this episode, and I've got an entire page worth of craft marketing and business notes right here. So hopefully we'll be able to touch on all of it. But really quick, I want to break just for a second to talk about our sponsor this week. Our sponsor this week is the science fiction anthology Exploration's First Contact by Woodbridge Press. Nathan Heisted put this anthology together last year. It's the follow-up to his Through the Wormhole anthology. I am going to read just the little blurb here and let you guys know that it is right now live on a Kindle countdown deal for 99 cents for the next 14 hours, 23 minutes, and 10 seconds. But
what
if
about
you're
now?
watching, what about now? What about now? But if you're watching, if you're listening on the feed or watching on the feed later, I believe the regular price is still only $2.99 or $3.99, depending. It's still a great price. It's a great anthology. Scott and I are both in it. It is this is the blurb. The sphere ship arrived suddenly, damaged and dying. After making contact, Earth learned they weren't alone in the universe. The sphere gave them knowledge of space travel and coordinates to other races spread across the expanse. It asked them to continue its mission of exploration and contact, but also left them a very stark warning: stay away from the star. Over the next 20 years, the United Earth Foundation was formed and their ships were built. Their displacement drives giving them the sphere shape when engaged. Their mission, First Contact. And there are, I believe, 14 stories. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
I thought there was 14. Or maybe
14 stories, 14 authors. And like I said, that is on a Kindle countdown deal right now for 99 cents. They are the sponsor for this episode, so please go and check that anthology out, and also check out the Through the Wormhole anthology, which I am also in, which was fun to write. And so it's a very different than our BZ Hercules ad, and hopefully in the next few weeks we'll have some more very cool sponsors to share with you guys. My poster just fell down on my wall.
I heard something fall, and I wondered
what happened. Is there an earthquake? What's going on? If I lose connection, you guys keep watching the show. Don't worry about me. So we're talking about craft, and you mentioned Scrivener, which I love Scrivener. Just so everybody knows, you are not a full-time author at this time. You work in IT, and you've been doing that for about 20 years. So you're writing part-time, but your production level for a part-time writer is phenomenal. So do you want to talk a little bit about that and how you go about writing?
In essence, I've gotten used to getting up early ever since I had kids. So now I don't stay up late. So I get up at like 5 in the morning. It usually takes me a half hour to get going, and I crank out some words in the morning. I get to work. I'll do a little bit during lunch, and then a little bit in the evening. Really, I mean, that it's hard to do, and it is exhausting. I do get to work from home quite a bit, so that definitely helps when I don't have a commute, because instead of spending an hour and a half in the car, I'm actually able to crank out 2,000 words. So How I get word counts up is by tracking word counts. I still have the spreadsheet from when I really started picking away at Road to Shandar, and I laugh at what I used to be able to do, but I could see it improve just by recording it. It was like 200 or 300 words a day. And then I had like the occasional 1,000 word. And I thought, God, it's never going to get any better than that. I've more recently, the best advice I can give to any writer is to challenge yourself. Find a process that's going to work for you. I wanted, like this past January, I wanted to see, how fast can I write a book? And does anything suffer for it? So I planned Infinity's Edge, which was the 4th book in the Ascension series. And I started in January and I wrote that in 15 days. I was averaging probably about 4,000 or 5,000 words. I took a week off of work. So let me qualify that.
Right.
So during that week off of work, when I didn't have the distraction, I was cranking out 5,000 words.
When were your kids in school?
Yeah, I have teenagers. They're 15 and 14, so
they're almost completely. Yeah, they can like live in the wild for like hours at a time.
Yeah. so when I went back to work, it went down to like 3,000 words, and I cranked it out. And when I went back through it, I'm like, I can. That's when the light bulb went off. Like, yeah, I can do this full time and be able to crank out, a book a month without the job. Definitely. So I did that. The planning still takes me a few weeks. I can't outline. I hear of writers like, yeah, I outlined this afternoon and now I'm going to start writing. I haven't gotten to that level. It still takes me at least a week or two to go through that process of setting up my outline and doing the chapter outlines. And then when I get to the writing part, then it's, unleash hell, so, and go.
So I'm curious about your outlining process. Like some people use, I do it 2 ways. I either use like legal notepads, or I have a whiteboard that I kind of, I am jealous. Guy says I'm jealous. I am. I have a whiteboard that I write out brainstorming ideas on and go from there. What's your outlining process like before you actually start writing?
I have a whiteboard too, but it has a schedule. So I'm looking at it right now. So it's always slapping me in the face that, yeah, you have to do this. That kind of stuff is motivating. But for outlining, I just do it in Scrivener.
Okay.
I just, like I said, I'll attack it from, and it depends. Like some days I'll focus on, like for science fiction, it's like what technology is available. What is a little bit about the world, and then I'll get into, I start going for the type of character I want to be in this story. And then it becomes, well, how will that unique character react to the circumstances they're tossed in? A lot of it's almost like freelance when I first start, and then I kind of drill down into what I need the story to be.
So by outlining in Scrivener, does that make it easier? I'm assuming it does, to go back and change the outline as it, drifts or morphs or changes, because you got to go back and, you make one change because you had a brilliant idea and it changes everything in your outline. So then do you go back and tweak it all the way through, or?
You never change an outline. Are you kidding me? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I do in Scrivener, I do everything in Scrivener because I like having one place. So my Scrivener files will have pictures, will have links to research and things like that. I use Pinterest quite a bit to draw onto, like, if I'm looking at an alien creature or ship, and I'll just pull that picture right into Scrivener so I can see it. The other thing I use in Scrivener is, if you're familiar with it, there's document notes on the lower right hand side. So right. I have that come up when I use the compose mode, because I don't want any distractions, but I just need that basic write up. Just having it up there to remind me this has to happen in the scene that I'm writing, and so I don't go off on tangents then.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Kind of keep you on task a little bit, so you don't go too far down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, but Scrivener can be so intimidating. It has it's like Excel. It has too many damn options in it, And I've taught a few people how to use it, and I'm like, look, just focus on what you want to do. Don't focus about the cork board or all these other cool shit that you don't need anymore. It's unless you need it.
Yeah, I've a lot of people they say, oh, I don't like Scrivener because there's too many features. And when I started with Scrivener, all I did was blank Scrivener document, new project file, and then write. And then you kind of learn all the rest of it as you go.
Yeah.
I did go through the tutorial that it includes in there. That helped, and I basically it came from need, and
right.
With things like Vellum, now you don't even need to learn half of it, because I spent a bulk of time learning how to compile and how to organize that.
I have my compile set up. I write even my first draft go in Scrivener is set up so that if I hit publish, it would compile as an ebook the way I'd want to publish it. I don't change it at all. I don't want to change in what gets included or not included or any of those things because it took me a while to figure that out. But I like Scrivener, like you said, for having the pictures and stuff, because when I write in Word or something, now I have this huge computer screen because Josh talked me into buying a Mac, but all
the best ideas come from Josh.
Basically, yeah. We covered that, I think, in previous episodes. Usually, it should be like one of our sponsor things. Get a good idea from Josh. But it's nice to be able to have a picture or an outline in Scrivener. You can split your screen, so a lot of times I'll have a document that I'm writing, but I'll have my outline or maybe a chapter that this one's linked to if I'm jumping POVs between chapters, and so I don't lose track of what those characters are doing. There's lots of good options, but the big thing is simpler is better, and to just use what you need, because you could literally spend a year just playing with Scrivener and finding all the perfect things. You don't need to do all that.
Yeah.
I love the label, the color label features you could do for the document, because I wrote another book called Haven of Shadows, which had a lot of point of views in it, but when I color coded each POV, it allowed me to see, the structure and was I giving somebody too much attention versus another one, and it definitely helped with story flow for that.
I think one of the main features I use in it is the revision feature, where you can. That and snapshot, where you go in and you have your first draft, and after you've done your first draft, you can snapshot it and then go into revision mode, and it changes the color of your font, and so you can go back and write new things, and it shows up as a different color, and you can see kind of where your story is. I use the blue color for my revisions, and so you'll see a whole bunch of black text, and then when I'm done revising, you'll have like one black word here, one black word here, and the rest of it's all blue. But you mentioned writing 4,000 words a day when you're off. How many words a day do you try to get when you have your full-time job, and then it's time to write? Well, on an average day, what do you shoot for?
I've been hitting 4,000 recently. So I want to transition to the full-time job. So it's all making a push at getting a particular word count out. Usually it's between 3,500 and 4,000, and I hit that, take a day off, and then get back to it. Because I'm going for a little bit more aggressive schedule than what I had before.
What about editing?
Okay, I really don't edit until I'm done. Sometimes, you'll have that part where it's in the back of your mind, like it's not right. And I use time. The other thing is I set timers. I do writing sprints. So if I must go back and reread a section, I set a timer for like 20 minutes, because otherwise I could spend 2 hours just going through a chapter, and not get anything done, as far as word count goes.
Right.
I find that when you set a timer and you said, I want to see, like, I like to gamify things. So it's like, well, how many words can I put out in an hour? This way I can do a good estimate of what I can produce that day. When I first started checking out how many words I could do in an hour, it was like 1,000 words. And now it's been hovering between 12 and 1,400 words, just depending. Unless it's early in the morning, then it's like 800 words.
And you mentioned that you do a lot of sprinting. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's basically I set a timer on Google, and I put on noise canceling headphones, put some music on, and go. That's one of the things I like about outlining is I know what I have to do, even though it's not spelt out. And like I know pantsers, like, I'll never outline. They'll just go and they end up in a lot of trouble where they either throw out manuscripts or, spend a lot of time rewriting. And I just don't find that with just even doing a bare bones outline.
I go back and forth between pantsing and outlining. I start out as a pantser, and when I start pantsing, I will write like at a ridiculously fast pace because I mean, I'll just be flying through the words, but then you come into this, and then you like crash and burn, and then you're producing like 3 words a day while you fix all the stuff you wrote the previous week or whatever.
And plus, you got to deal with that fear, that gnawing doubt, like, is the story any good? Or I find that as I get to the close of a manuscript, I'll have this, I'll want to like back off and take a few days off. and then my word count goals will go down. But I don't honestly, like, I have days where I don't want to do it. I don't feel like writing, but when I go back and reread the manuscript, and it's one of the first things I learned with the first Road to Shandar is that I couldn't tell what mood I was in when I wrote that part. Because I know there were parts I was on and other parts where I'm like, this is just shit, but I'm going to write it anyway.
Right.
There's been other people I've heard say that is if you go back and look at your manuscript a year later, you won't be able to tell the parts. You won't be able to say, oh yeah, that was the day I was really on fire, and this was the day where I was, fighting for every word. That you usually can't tell the difference.
Yeah.
I think it was Neil Gaiman that said, write every day, whether you're in the mood or not. And then when you're done, you go back, you can't tell, like you said, what was written when you were in the mood and what was written when you weren't in the mood.
Yeah.
So moving on just a little bit, your books are obviously successful. Can you talk about a little bit of how you do the marketing and what qualifies as a successful book launch to you?
Okay. I track what I spend on a book, and that includes I don't account for my time or anything like that, but if I spend a certain amount on covers, editing, proofreading, and whatever advertising I do on launch. So once that book, even if it's in a series, earns enough money to make back my investment, then I consider it a success. I don't know a better way to do it. That's just how I measure it. So if I spend $1,800 on a book, when it earns $1,800, I'm in the black. I mean, I'm in the black, right? I'm in the good. So,
yeah.
What was the first half of that question?
What do you do for marketing?
Okay. God, that changes from year to year with how the environment changes. I know, like, when I first launched Road to Shandar, I just was pretty good at picking out keywords, and that thing really sold itself in the beginning. I had really low expectations because that's everything I read on keyboards. If you make $500 your first year, you're doing good. I think I stumbled along and hit a few I don't know, tropes or whatever that people liked and started reading that book. I have since zeroed in on more marketing for the Ascension series, which it's my best seller right now as far as when I compare, even though the other series has been out a lot longer. And I attribute that to just being a better writer is one thing. The other thing was I released the Star Shroud and the book 2, the Star Divide, within a month of each other, and that was huge. Right. The third, I mean, it just catapulted it, and as far as book sales went, the money that came in from the royalties was almost equal to my IT salary that I've been doing for 20 years. And it kind of made me sit up and take notice that, and I say that like, yay. And I say it like, because when you're first trying to write that first book, it's daunting to write one freaking book, let alone saying, oh, don't release that until you have 3. Right. Yeah. And I don't know if that's really practical for the first time writer who may not have a lot of money to invest in it, because it does take money to do it right.
Right.
One thing I've learned, your friends and family, your English teacher are not editors. Find a good editor. And
yes.
And when I have an editor I love right now, and I judged her based on the books that she's edited. I looked at the reviews and stuff like that. And if I found things like, certain mistakes that I think an editor should catch, then, they didn't make the short list and stuff like that. Getting back to marketing, I got off of my editor and proofreader thing.
No, that's good.
That's important stuff, though. That is kind of the first part of marketing, is make a good product.
Yeah. And I learned from the School of Hard Knocks, because when I first released Road to Shandara, I only had friends and family help me with the editing until I got an editor to help go through it again. So for marketing now, I definitely run Facebook ads. This year I've been experimenting with Amazon ads, and I have an email list. It's a few thousand strong. And it's been that way. I can one thing I like, I'm MailChimp, and you can look back at all your campaigns. And when I announced like Echoes of a Gloried Past, which is the second book in the Safanarion Order, I had like 30 people on there, but 90% of them opened it up, and so it was nice, so definitely I do use email lists, and I haven't done the thing where you offer the book in return for signing up for an email address and do it all. It's on my list of things to try.
The reader magnet.
Yeah. How I got my email list is my list is split between fantasy readers and science fiction readers. So for the fantasy one, you put up a short story, and it kind of there was a part in the second book that it would have been out of place if I stuck this in there. So I made it into a short story. And as they finished the book, I figured if you've read the second book, you're invested in the story. You'll probably want to read the short story. And when I made that available for sign up, people, started subscribing more.
You mentioned in our talk on Saturday that the difference between going for KDP and going wide, and what your decision was to doing either one.
Oh yeah. Let me bring something up, because I'll give you real numbers for that.
Ooh, numbers.
Ooh, yeah, we like that.
I track things monthly. I do metrics and stuff like that, because that's the only way I can tell if what I'm doing is working. And so I did an experiment. I had the Safanarion Order series was wide for a long time. And I had the first book perma-free for a while. Then I decided that my space opera series is in Kindle Unlimited, and it does very well there. So I'm like, well, let me try pulling them back and see how they do. So wide, that series brought in 2,111 sales, with a perma-free, running some Facebook ads and stuff like that.
That's monthly?
No, that over the course of 3 months for that okay. Series, right?
Gotcha.
So then I did the 3 months snapshot for when I had it in Kindle Unlimited, running promotions, either a Kindle Countdown deal or one free. I actually stacked countdown deals through the series over that 3 months, just to see, how well it could do, and see if any of the Kindle Unlimited readers from the Space Opera series would transfer over. And it was significantly less. I mean, it ended up being 566 books sold less than the 3 months I was wide. Wow. So I don't know why. I mean, I can't even begin. I just know that for that fantasy series, being wide is better than being in Kindle Unlimited. But you're going to have to experiment on your own. There are guys out there killing it in fantasy and Kindle Unlimited. Mm-hmm. I'm reluctant to pull the Ascension series out right now, but eventually it will probably go wide too at some point.
Yeah.
When that audience that is in Kindle Unlimited gets exhausted of it, it'll happen eventually. One thing I can attribute to the continued sales for the Safanarion Order series is I'm always promoting that first book. it's never not being marketed either as a box set, or that, there's no magic where you push a button and you don't have to do anything. It doesn't work. I see a lot of writers do that and then wonder why their books don't sell. Unless you get to that lofty 1% status that some people enjoy,
right?
You have to be a little bit more pragmatic about it.
Do you see a lot of buy through from your box set? So I see it's 1 through 3. Do you see a lot of read through to your 4th book in the series for this?
Yeah, because yes, I do, because I have the numbers to prove it. And the number of reviews for the 4th book are more than the 3rd.
Nice.
So, buried in my spreadsheets are, I sold more of the 4th book than I have the 3rd, and that's from the box set readers.
And we talked a little bit too about you're going to be in Galactic Frontiers, which is a science fiction anthology that's CCKK put together. It's out now. It's actually got the orange sticky bestseller tag on it right now on Amazon. You wrote a short story for that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I wrote. There's one of the alien species are called the Boxons, and one of the main characters from that species, his name is Caladamor. He's of course, I can't even remember what I called him. Battle commander. That's how I did their designations. And, he's, that strong soldier type. And the short story I wrote for that was early in his career, before the war with the Zygen species, was just starting. The dark betrayal is depicted in that story, which is called Crash Landing. And it was a nice little, I think it's like 6,000 or 7,000 words short story that, basically gives you a taste of my writing style. I tend to think in terms of novels, so short stories are a challenge for me.
Right.
So I'll let somebody else comment on whether that short story is a short story or just a chapter out of the book. But I think it's a short story. Tried to structure it as one, but it was definitely fun to do.
Well, I like that when people do short stories and anthologies like this, so they tie it specifically to novels or universes or worlds that they already have written. So it gives you, you read that and you're like, oh, I kind of like his work. But then when you go and read it, you can see, oh, that has something specifically to do with the universe I'm reading. And that I like that a lot. That's cool. I love those tie-ins. We are coming up to the end of the hour. I will mention that the anthology we just mentioned, Galactic Frontiers by CCKK, is out, and we have CCKK coming on the show Thursday to talk about that, specifically about that project and his Star Brigade series that he's been rebranding. Can you tell our audience where we can find more about you and where we can pick your books up at?
You can find more about me at my website, kenlozito.com. On there, I do have a upcoming books tab that I try to keep relatively updated. I used to be really good about that, but like I said, the new series I'm writing is it's my super secret project. But yeah, it's because I'm going for the rapid book release at the end of the summer. So I'm writing 3 books and I'm going to pop them out because I've seen that work well for other authors, and it's basically my plan for transitioning to become a full-time author. So
we are no stranger to super secret projects around.
We like super secret projects. So what do you think this giant super secret trilogy thing is going to kick off? You said this year sometime? Or?
Oh yeah, in August. Yeah.
In August.
Okay.
I have it loosely referred to. Titles are the last thing I come up with, but I have it called the First Colony series. But I haven't done a Google search to see if anybody else already has that. So it might already be same, but that's how I'm referring to it. I can keep going, man. We'll go for like another hour if you let me. But I don't know.
I told you. I said that I knew that we were going to have to bring you back because I knew that we were going to have so much stuff to cover. We wouldn't get to all of it. So I do want to invite you back for a Thursday night. Hopefully we can do it a little early. We've been kicking around the idea of changing the time frame for Thursday to an earlier time. I'm going to put up a poll on our group this week and see what time works for everybody, because now that Scott's on day shift and I'm on day shift, the 10 o'clock is a little late, especially if people are on the East Coast. So we're talking about
to jaw jacking and stay up till 12:30 and then get up at 4 to go to work. And
yeah, that's no bueno.
Yeah, so that can hurt a little bit on the next day. But
well, so Ken, thanks so much for coming on the show today. It's been a blast talking with you.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, and I'd love to come back.
It feels like we've been talking for like 15 minutes, and it's been an hour and 5 minutes. So
we'll do a little bit of post show stuff.
The post show,
well. We can maybe set up some things. So
everybody that hung out with us in a live chat, thank you for coming and hanging out with us. It has been a blast always talking with you, and
I bought like 5 books during this
fielding
episode.
your questions. Yeah, yes, and go out and buy those books. They're
anyway, go ahead.
They're great books to purchase and read, and that's why we do this. So let us know what you thought about the show. Let us know what you thought about our guest, Ken, in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe if you have not. Make sure you share this around with your Facebook buddies so we can get some more people hanging out with us during the show.
Remember that if they were your real friends, they would also subscribe to Keystroke Medium. So
that is true.
Don't.
You need to potentially unfriend some people if they do not subscribe. So just lay down the law.
It's a well-known metric of.
Oh man, great time. Well, for Scott Moon, I am Josh Hayes. We have been live with Ken Lozito. Be sure you come back next time and hang out with us while we're talking about reading, writing, and everything in between right here on Keystroke Medium. You guys have a great Monday.